What happens when a music legend sits down for what should be a friendly chat, only to face a barrage of disrespectful questions that push her to her absolute breaking point? In just 45 seconds, one careless comment would transform a routine late-night interview into television chaos, exposing the ugly truth about how some hosts treat their guests behind the glamorous facade of celebrity culture. The studio lights were blazing hot that evening as Chaka Khan, the undisputed queen of funk, settled into the plush guest chair across from Andy Cohen on his popular talk show. She had come to promote her latest project, expecting the usual softball questions about her legendary career and upcoming tours. What she got instead was something entirely different. Andy leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing across his lips as he shuffled through his note cards. The cameras were rolling, the audience was primed, and he was ready to make some television magic. But his version of magic involved pushing buttons and crossing lines that should never be crossed. "So Chaka," Andy began, his voice dripping with false charm, "let me ask you something that I know everyone is dying to know about." He paused dramatically, clearly savoring the moment. "Your voice has changed so much over the years. Some people are saying you sound, well, different now, older. What do you say to critics who think your best days are behind you?" The question hit like a slap across the face. Chaka's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her composure. This was not her first rodeo with difficult interviewers, and she had learned long ago how to handle disrespect with grace. "Andy," she replied, her voice steady but with a slight edge, "I think my voice has evolved, just like any artist's voice does over time. I have been performing for over 50 years, and I am proud of every single note I have ever sung. My fans seem to disagree with those critics you mentioned." But Andy was just getting started. He leaned forward, sensing what he thought was vulnerability, ready to pounce like a predator who had caught the scent of wounded prey. "Right, but come on," he pressed, his tone becoming more aggressive. "You have to admit that some of those high notes you used to hit so effortlessly, they are just not there anymore. I mean, we all age, but for a singer, that has got to be terrifying, right? Knowing that your instrument is deteriorating?" The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even they could feel the tension building in the room. This was not playful banter between a host and guest. This was something much uglier. Chaka took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Andy, I think you are being incredibly disrespectful right now. My voice is not deteriorating, it is maturing. There is a difference, and I would appreciate it if you would show some respect for my decades of experience and contribution to music." Andy chuckled, a sound that felt more like nails on a chalkboard than genuine amusement. "Oh, come on, Chaka. Do not be so sensitive. This is just honest conversation. I am asking the questions that everyone else is too polite to ask. That is what makes good television." "Good television?" Chaka repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You think humiliating your guests makes good television? You think attacking someone's talent and legacy is entertainment?" The host waved his hand dismissively, as if her concerns were nothing more than trivial complaints. "Look, I am not attacking anyone. I am having a real conversation about real issues. Your fans want honesty, not sugar-coated publicity speak. My fans," Chaka said slowly, emphasizing each word, "want respect. They want to see their favorite artist treated with dignity, not torn down by someone who has never walked in their shoes or faced the challenges that come with a lifetime in this industry." Andy rolled his eyes, clearly enjoying the conflict he had created. "Dignity? Please, you are a public figure. You put yourself out there, and that means you are fair game for honest criticism. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not be doing interviews." The words hung in the air like poison gas. The audience was dead silent now, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. Even the camera operators seemed to lean in closer, instinctively knowing they were about to capture something significant. Chaka stared at Andy for a long moment, her expression shifting from hurt to something much more dangerous. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at being treated like nothing more than a target for his cruel entertainment. "Fair game?" she repeated, her voice now carrying the full weight of her decades in the music industry. All the battles she had fought, all the disrespect she had endured and overcome. "You think I am fair game?" Andy nodded, completely oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. "Absolutely. That is how this business works, sweetheart." The word sweetheart was the final straw. It dripped with condescension and casual sexism, the kind of patronizing tone that had been used to diminish powerful women for generations. In that single word, Andy had revealed everything ugly about his character and his complete lack of respect for the woman sitting across from him. Chaka's eyes flashed with a fire that could have melted steel. The word sweetheart still echoed in the studio like a gunshot, and everyone present knew that something irreversible had just happened. The Queen of Funk had been pushed too far, and there would be consequences. "Sweetheart?" she said, her voice now carrying the full power of 5 decades in the music industry. "Did you just call me sweetheart?" She leaned forward in her chair, her posture shifting from defensive to offensive. "Let me tell you something, Andy. I have been in this business since before you were even born. I have earned every single accolade, every award, every bit of respect that comes with my name. And you have the audacity to sit there and call me sweetheart while you try to tear me down for your little television show?" Andy seemed to realize for the first time that he might have crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down with the arrogance that had gotten him into this mess in the first place. "Look, I did not mean anything by it," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "You are being way too sensitive about this whole thing. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation here." "Honest conversation?" Chaka's voice was rising now, and there was no hiding her fury. "You call ambushing your guests with disrespectful questions and patronizing language an honest conversation? You think treating people like garbage makes you some kind of hard-hitting journalist?" The host shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from his guest. He had probably grown accustomed to celebrities who would smile and take whatever abuse he dished out, too concerned about their public image to fight back. But Chaka Khan was not that kind of artist. "I think you are overreacting," Andy said, his voice taking on a defensive tone. "This is how interviews work. I ask tough questions, you give interesting answers. That is entertainment." "Entertainment?" Chaka stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward with the force of her movement. "You think my pain is entertainment? You think humiliating someone who has given their entire life to music is entertaining?" The studio fell into complete silence, except for the quiet hum of the cameras still rolling. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they should applaud, gasp, or simply pray that they were not about to witness someone's career imploding on live television. Andy tried to regain control of the situation, but his voice betrayed his panic. "Chaka, please sit down. Let us just talk about this like adults." "Like adults?" she repeated, incredulous. "Adults show respect for each other, Andy. Adults do not ambush their guests with questions designed to make them look bad. Adults do not call successful women sweetheart in a condescending tone. You want to talk like adults? Then start acting like one." The host's mask was slipping now, and his true colors were showing through. Instead of apologizing or trying to de-escalate the situation, he became even more aggressive, as if her resistance to his bullying had somehow offended him personally. "You know what?" Andy said, his voice growing sharper. "Maybe the critics are right about you. Maybe your attitude is exactly why people are saying you are difficult to work with. Maybe that is why your career has not been what it used to be." The words hit the studio like a bomb. Even the production crew, who had seen their share of uncomfortable interview moments, seemed to recoil at the cruelty of the statement. This was not journalism or entertainment. This was character assassination, plain and simple. Chaka stood perfectly still for a moment, absorbing the full impact of what had just been said to her. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breathing, and when she spoke again, her voice was deadly calm. "My career," she said slowly, "has spanned more than 50 years. I have sold millions of albums, won multiple Grammy Awards, and influenced countless artists who came after me. I have performed for presidents, royalty, and fans all over the world who still sing my songs today. My attitude, as you call it, is called self-respect. It is called knowing my worth and refusing to let small-minded people try to tear me down for cheap television moments." Andy tried to interrupt, but she held up her hand, stopping him cold. "I am not finished," she continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You sit behind that desk thinking you have power because you have a television show and a platform. But real power comes from talent, from perseverance, from touching people's lives with your art. You have none of that. What you have is a microphone and an attitude, and you think that gives you the right to disrespect people who have actually accomplished something meaningful in their lives." The host was visibly rattled now, his carefully constructed television persona crumbling before everyone's eyes. "Look, I think we should take a commercial break and collect ourselves here." "Commercial break?" Chaka laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can just cut away and pretend this did not happen? You think you can attack someone and then hide behind your producers when they fight back?" She began walking toward the edge of the set, her movement deliberate and powerful. Every step seemed to echo through the silent studio, marking the end of whatever relationship had existed between host and guest just minutes earlier. "Where are you going?" Andy called after her, desperation creeping into his voice. He could sense that he was losing control of his own show, and the panic was evident to everyone watching. Chaka turned back to face him one last time, and her expression was a mixture of disappointment and fierce determination. "I'm going somewhere where people understand what respect looks like, Andy. Somewhere where my talent and my legacy are appreciated, instead of mocked by someone who mistakes cruelty for cleverness." The television studio had become a battlefield, and Chaka Khan was making her final stand. Andy Cohen sat behind his desk like a general who had just realized his army was retreating, and his strategy had backfired spectacularly. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what would become one of the most talked-about interview disasters in television history. "You cannot just walk out in the middle of a live show," Andy called out, his voice cracking with the desperation of a man watching his carefully crafted image crumble in real time. "This is unprofessional, Chaka. Think about your reputation." Chaka stopped dead in her tracks and turned around slowly, her eyes blazing with the kind of fury that comes from years of putting up with exactly this type of behavior. "My reputation?" she said, her voice carrying across the studio like thunder. "You want to talk about reputation? I built my reputation note by note, song by song, performance by performance over 5 decades. You are trying to destroy yours in 5 minutes. The audience was completely silent now, witnessing something that went far beyond entertainment. This was a masterclass in dignity under fire, a lesson in how to stand up to a bully who had mistaken a platform for power. Andy tried one more time to regain control, but his voice sounded thin and weak compared to the commanding presence of the woman standing before him. "Look, maybe I came on a little strong, but that is just my interview style. People expect that from me." "Your interview style?" Chaka repeated, shaking her head in disbelief. "Calling successful women sweetheart is not a style, Andy. It is disrespect. Attacking someone's talent and legacy is not journalism. It is cruelty disguised as entertainment." She took a step closer to his desk, and Andy actually leaned back in his chair, as if her words carried physical force. "You know what the real tragedy is here? You had the Queen of Funk sitting in that chair, ready to share stories about her incredible career, ready to talk about music and art and the experiences that shaped her into a legend. Instead, you chose to try to tear her down for ratings." The host opened his mouth to respond, but Chaka was not finished with him yet. Years of industry politics, disrespect, and people underestimating her had led to this moment, and she was going to make sure every word counted. "You could have asked me about working with Prince, about my time with Rufus, about the songs that meant something to people. You could have talked about the craft of singing, the evolution of funk music, the challenges and triumphs of being a woman in this industry. Instead, you chose to focus on trying to make me feel small and irrelevant." Andy squirmed in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with having his motivations laid bare so eloquently. "I was just trying to ask the questions that other people were thinking." "No," Chaka said firmly, pointing directly at him. "You were trying to create a moment at my expense. You were hoping I would break down, get emotional, maybe cry a little bit, so your viewers could feel superior watching a legend fall apart on television. But that is not who I am, and that is not what happened here." The production staff around the edges of the set stood frozen, unsure whether to continue filming or try to intervene. This had gone far beyond the typical celebrity interview into something much more significant and uncomfortable. "The truth is," Chaka continued, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute moral authority, "you revealed more about yourself in this interview than you ever did about me. You showed everyone watching exactly what kind of person you are when you think you have power over someone. You showed them that you mistake meanness for cleverness and cruelty for honesty." Andy made one final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Come on, Chaka, sit back down. Let us finish the interview properly. We can talk about your music, your career, whatever you want to discuss." But it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone in that studio knew it. Chaka looked at him with something that might have been pity if it had not been mixed with such complete disdain. "Finish the interview properly?" she said, gathering her purse from beside the guest chair. "Andy, this interview is over. It was over the moment you decided that disrespecting your guest was more important than celebrating their achievements." She walked toward the exit with the grace and dignity of someone who had nothing left to prove to anyone. Every step was measured, deliberate, and powerful. This was not a retreat. This was a victory march. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, turning to address the audience directly, "remember that you deserve respect in every interaction, whether you are sitting in a television studio or standing in line at the grocery store. Never let anyone convince you that accepting disrespect is part of the price you pay for success. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that filled the studio. They were not just applauding her departure. They were applauding her refusal to be diminished, her insistence on dignity, and her demonstration of what real strength looks like when faced with someone who mistakes a platform for permission to be cruel. Andy sat behind his desk, stunned into silence as the Queen of Funk walked out of his studio and into television history. The cameras captured his shocked expression, the empty guest chair, and the sound of sustained applause for a woman who had just reminded everyone what it means to stand up for yourself with grace, power, and unshakable self-respect. In 45 seconds, one careless comment had indeed transformed a routine interview into chaos. But the chaos had not destroyed Chaka Khan. It had revealed the true character of both people in that room, and only one of them had emerged with their dignity intact.